This is Dr. Kalpana. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
Yes, doing good, sir. So welcome to the Institute back. We are happy to have you on
Virtually.
behalf of NITT and also on behalf of the Alumni Interaction Cell and NITTSAC, which is the student body of the Alumni Interaction. Happy to welcome you, sir. So thanks for having chosen to give us this time and this privilege to have you amidst us.
Oh, thank you.
You
It's
so
my
much.
pleasure. Truly my
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Pooja is yet to join. So I'll start with the introduction. So we take great pride in welcoming Dr. Raj Iyer, an alumnus of the 1992 batch of Electrical Engineering in NITTSAC, who was recently appointed as the Chief Information Officer of the US Army. After graduating from NITTSAC, Dr. Iyer went on to pursue his higher studies in electrical engineering at the University of Texas Arlington and went on to pursue his MBA from the University of Michigan School of Business. Over the years, he has administered high-level roles at various organizations. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, sir. We're honored to have you. Shall we proceed with the interview, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, sir. So we'll start with the questions. So the first question, what are the responsibilities that the Chief Information Officer has in the day-to-day operations of the Army?
Yeah, thank you. So before I jump into the answers, just a very quick thank you to the Alumni Association at NITTSAC, and truly an honor and a privilege to be back, even though virtually, given the pandemic. But looking forward to coming back to campus and meeting with everyone. It certainly has been a long time since I left the campus, almost 30 years now. And looking forward to interacting more with my alumni. So again, as I said, great honor to be back, and hopefully, I can share a few thoughts and my perspectives on my career journey and what I've gone through since I left the G, and hopefully will be an inspiration to others. So going back to your question on what is the CIO's role? That is a very loaded question. I can spend probably 60 minutes on that. But before I answer that, though, I just do want to set kind of like a geopolitical framework for why the Army established a Chief Information Officer. It's I mean, I'm sure you're tracking this in media these days. It's no secret that we have China and Russia today growing in power in the world in terms of their military might and disrupting the peace that we've had from a nation state perspective, right? So the last 20 years for the United States and the Army has been fighting terrorists in the Middle East, and as we have seen in the last few years, we are noticing an imbalance in terms of nation states, especially China and Russia, now starting to, like I said, create some imbalance in the world. And so when we look at how they are progressing and the approaches that they are taking, it's all about leveraging technology to fight other nations. And a lot of times it's when I say fight, it's not even visible. The fight that I know that most countries are already under today from some of these countries is on the cyber warfare side. And so it's really, really important for the United States to what we call move from industrial age army to the information age army. And so fighting in cyberspace and fighting using modern technologies like artificial intelligence is how we hope that the United States will retain its dominance in the world and help bring peace, right? At the end of the day, it's all about strategic deterrence. And in the 1970s and 80s, it was about how we use nuclear technology to be the deterrence, right? And moving forward, it's going to be how we leverage technology and some of these digital technologies such as cloud computing and artificial intelligence and robotics and everything else to be able to bring that strategic deterrence. But God forbid if there is a war, especially in the South China Sea and other parts of the world, the United States has to be ready to be able to protect our interests and to be able to win a large-scale combat operation decisively, right? And so that is the journey that the United States Army is on for the next few years. And as I said, it is really moving away from our approach to fighting wars using, tanks and helicopters and aircraft, which we will have, but to be able to actually integrate that with, like I said, modern digital technologies. So this is a modernization effort in the Army that has never been seen before in the almost 250-year history of the United States Army. And so the senior leadership, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, and others made a conscious decision that they needed one person to be able to drive this transformation in the Army and to help modernize the Army in integrating these new technologies and positioning us to be in a position where we can counter these threats. So the role of the CIO is essentially twofold. It's one, basically, like I said, it is how do we establish, the right framework to modernize, and we have set ourselves a very aggressive target of getting to some kind of interim operational capability by 2028, which, that's only 7 years away from now. And then, to be able to be ready for full-scale operations by 2035, right? So, but given that so many of these technologies are still evolving and there's so much work to be done, we are getting a head start. And my role as the CIO really is to be the champion for these digital technologies, so the Army can adopt them more rapidly or not, hindered by any bureaucratic processes or policy, quite frankly, because we have, just like any large government organization, we have large number of policies that are antique and needs to be adapted and changed to reflect the how technology is changing, but also to basically to set a strategy, right? So if you don't set a strategy and a vision for how you're going to accomplish this modernization, then you're going to have a lot of programs that are disconnected that will just not work together. And so we see that part of how we fight in the future is what's called through multi-domain operations. That's a true integration of our land operations, our land combat operations, our airspace operations, working with our Air Force, sea and naval operations through working with the Navy, but as well as space and cyberspace, right? So these are the 5 domains that we are trying to bring together in an integrated way. And what ties all these domains together is data, right? So when you're fighting at the speed of war in future, and to us, that's using things like hypersonic missiles, right? When you use hypersonic missiles, you no longer have hours or minutes, to be able to react. You now have seconds to be able to react. And so when you are fighting at that speed of war, you have to be able to take advantage of things like artificial intelligence to be able to quickly look at data from sensors around the world, to be able to fuse the data, to integrate the data for decision making, and then to be able to send direction, out to a field to be able to execute missions, right? So that speed of war is necessitating us to be able to force us to use these technologies. So prototyping these efforts, establishing the right data standards for interoperability, establishing the right architectures for integration of these new weapon system platforms. And essentially, at the end of the day, we have now turned cloud computing into a warfighting platform, right? I mean, everybody's used to looking at cloud computing as a place in the cloud to host your applications or systems or your data. We are now looking at leveraging cloud as a warfighting platform. So that is my primary hat as the CIO of the United States Army. But while we do that, we also have to balance that against how do we do that in essentially what we call a budget neutral environment, right? Because the current administration's priorities is all about how do we bring healthcare back to our citizens? How do we protect the nation? How do we build infrastructure and more citizen-facing services and a lesser emphasis on the defense budget? So when you're in that kind of environment, you have to look at how we can essentially, achieve this modernization in a cost neutral, budget neutral environment. And to do that, as a CIO, my responsibility is to look for efficiencies, cost efficiencies, and cost savings. So when we look at our $15 billion budget today for IT, right, that's per year, we see tremendous opportunities for us to reduce that spend while we modernize at the same time, right? So it's all about how we divest of our legacy systems and things that we don't need, that don't align with how we're going to fight in future, but also how we take those savings and harvest those savings for modernization. So achieving this balance of divestment versus modernization is again one of the key roles that I play as a CIO. Now, while we're doing that, we have to obviously maintain support for our current operations worldwide. So I have, under me a staff of over 15,000 IT professionals worldwide in 150 countries. And so they are supporting current operations today, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq or in the Middle East or in Africa or in places in Asia and other countries. And so how do we make sure that we continue to maintain and support those operations through IT, especially supporting both defensive and offensive cyber operations. Obviously, protecting our networks is our number one priority right now. So as a CIO, I'm also responsible for the cybersecurity and making sure that we are keeping our networks and our data safe. And so how do we make sure we protect ourselves from both state actors and non-state actors? Because to us, that's, like I said, that's a war that we continue to fight every day today. So hopefully that gives you a little perspective for the broader context of the role of the CIO.
Yes, so there was a lot of information. Like we could ask so many questions from that itself. So sticking to the questions, so the next question is that what drew you towards the U.S. Army ever since your PhD days? And did you work as a defense security consultant at Deloitte help you in reaching this destination of the U.S. Army? So how did it go about planning that you will join the U.S. Army?
Yeah, so you can never really plan your career, is what I tell people, and so I actually first joined the U.S. Army back in 2002. So this is my second time coming back into the Army. So back in 2002, I had I had finished my PhD in 1997. So I had co-founded a startup, done that for several years, and actually the United States Army was one of my customers for my startup company then, and worked extensively with the Army. And as I got to understand the Army and the role that they played, it was interesting that again, this was back in the early 90s. For about the 10 years before that, the U.S. Army had essentially basically built up a lot of technical debt, is what I call, because they had essentially reduced funding. The Cold War had ended right in the 80s, and so the 90s was a time frame where the U.S. did not invest in the defense of the nation. And then we all know what happened on 9/11, right? And we were quickly forced to move into fighting wars in places that we had never been before, and so the reason for me to join was was really out of true patriotism. I had obviously by the time been in this country for well over 10 years, and had recently become a U.S. citizen. I had become naturalized, and I felt like I had to give something back to this country that gave me so much, right? So when I came in as a student, got my master's and my PhD, and this country helped me build a successful startup company. And when you look at somebody coming in as an immigrant into this nation, and this nation welcoming you and giving you that opportunity, I felt like it was something that I have to give back to this country. So it was something that I was hoping was only going to be a short-term engagement. But as I made my way into the Army and I looked at the challenges that they were having and how they were struggling to support the fight, and this was in the early days of the war against in Afghanistan, and then later in Iraq. I stayed on for almost 10 years then, and because it was so impactful, because what I was doing as an engineer then in the Army was really, helping field build a lot of the weapon system platforms, supporting the war effort. And as you are tracking those days, many of you were very young. There were, literally hundreds of thousands of our soldiers getting killed every day because we just didn't have the right equipment. And so it was a very impactful time for me to be there to help, build and support the implementation and, the fielding of new weapon systems during that effort. And then it truly, when you get into public service, I come from a family that's, I'm a third generation public servant in my family. So there's always this, the soft corner for doing something back for your nation, whether it was in India or whether here, you're always, there's a passion for, giving back to your nation. And so I got to believe there was always somewhere in my blood. So, when I came back to the private sector, and I was with Deloitte for almost 7 years, again it was about I wanted to stay engaged with the defense industry. So although I was now a consultant on the private side, I stayed engaged with the Army and helping advise them and their senior leaders on how do they accomplish this modernization and transformation that I talked about. And then when this opportunity came along, which was completely unexpected, for me to be the CIO, I certainly was not one that I was planning on. But again, it was a call to duty. And when I got that call from the Secretary of the Army and very, very senior officials at the Pentagon, it was hard for me to say no to that, because again, it's about, when you're being called to help protect the nation. It's you just don't say no to that. At least I personally couldn't say no to that. So here's where I am.
Hello, sir. Sorry about the interruption earlier. There was a power cut in my house. So just going ahead with the next question, sir. So we want to know, how does a person go about building a professional network while switching careers? How do you improve and sustain this network when you're changing organizations or positions?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's one that has definitely changed for me, since social media came about, right? So the early days, even though I had built a successful .com startup, social media didn't exist in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so I'd say I have personally relied heavily on LinkedIn. In fact, I was probably one of the earliest adopters of LinkedIn as a social media platform, and to help build my network. And again, not that I was, I knew something was going to happen in the future and how helpful that was going to be, but it just, it felt good to be able to, be part of a virtual network of people that are doing similar things. In my case, as you can probably tell from my background, because I spent so much time in the defense industry, over a period of time, you start to build that network. You start to know who the people are and who the industries are and who the movers and shakers are. And so it's what I would like to tell people is that, first of all, you gotta know what your passion is, right? If you can't, you can't be going around from one to another, this one today, something else tomorrow, and third thing a third day, right? You got to know at the end of the day, I'd say, for you to make sustained progress over your career, you should know what your passions are. In my case, whether I knew it or not initially, it became very clear that my passions were in national security and defense, and so that's why you start to build your network. And so as I have changed jobs, I have continued to stay in touch with people that I've known, especially people in the Army. And even though most of them maybe are not on social media sites like LinkedIn, I have leveraged many of the people that I have worked with and worked for in the past as my mentors, right? So, and that has been one of my, I'd say probably my number one reason for success is maintaining that mentorship relationships. And I have people that I have, since my very first job that I've had, stayed in contact with, and continue to seek advice and guidance from them on, because I can tell you that they know you better than you know yourself, and better than your family members will know you, right? So I would say stay engaged with mentors. The 3 or 4 people that have helped me in my career, I still stay in touch with them. I interact with them. I ask them for advice, and they give me frank, direct advice, right, on whether this particular job is the right one for me. In fact, quite honestly, before I made the decision that I wanted to take this job as a CIO, I made several calls to my mentors to see, am I the right person for this? Can I really actually do this, given how complex the job is and how difficult this is going to be? Because I did not think I was even qualified for this job, and to be really honest. And but it was my mentors who knew me, who saw the potential in me, over my 30-year career. They were the ones that said, no, you're absolutely the person for this job, and we know you can do this. And it was unanimous, right? And so that helped me, give me the confidence that I could do this. So I would say that is so both the close relationship with your mentors, but then a larger group of professionals in your area of expertise, and maintaining those relationships and communication, and staying in touch with industry and what's happening, because, as you know, technology changes so fast, and keeping track of who's doing what in industry, I think is going to be key to success.
Sure, sir. So you talked about mentorship and the position of the CIO as such. So in your career, you held various leadership positions for a good part of them. So what do you feel are important traits that a leader must possess to be successful in what they lead, the teams they lead or the organizations they lead?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? And this is, again, a learning experience for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people, because I can tell you, when as an engineer, right, and all of you are, when you graduate and you come out into the business world, one, I believe, we seem to think that we have to be problem solvers first, and we have to solve problems ourselves, right? Because that's mostly what we are taught in engineering schools. I'd say over my career now, I have come to the recognition that that is really not the case. It's about how you are able to work together in teams, and how you're able to successfully solve problems in a group setting, rather than individual effort. Because when you move up the organization, as long as you're on one project by yourself, it's one thing. But again, those are probably no more than the first 2 or 3 years of your career. As you start to move up, it's all about now how do you work together in teams, and as you move up even higher, even larger teams, where those teams may not work for you, right? You now have to work with peers. And then when you get to the position like where I am now, which is very, very highly strategic, right? It's essentially, I'm kind of like the CEO of a $15-20 billion company with 15,000 employees. I cannot be the problem solver. It's about really how you set the strategic vision, and how you are able to bring about change that's a grassroots level change, right? And at that point, it is all about your ability to communicate your vision, your ability to motivate and incentivize people to do the right things. It's making sure that you create the same passion that you have in you in other people, right? So they can give you their 100% best every day, and how you empower them, right? And it's not about how you control them; it is how you empower them. And so to me, that, again, and I learn every day. I mean, as I said, even this particular job for me has been a huge learning experience, because when I first took this job as a CIO and I came on, as engineers, I think we have a tendency to want to be able to touch and feel things and to solve problems ourselves, right? We want to, like, hey, I see 100 problems, I want to solve them today, right? And that's what I did. Quite honestly, when I came into this job, I said I actually wrote down a list of 100 things I want to do, right? I realized within the first 30 days that I will never get to solve those 100 problems. Not that I don't know how to solve them. I just will not, there's just physically not enough hours in a day to be able to solve them on your own. And even if I did solve those problems on my own, right, what I have not solved is a problem of how I bring the entire workforce with me along the way, right? And if I'm not able to do that, I have not been successful. One person cannot be the bottleneck for an organization, right? And so so I have been a strong believer in that. You have to have, you can't have one person that's the smartest in any office, in any company, that's controlling and hogging everything and is being the bottleneck for progress. And again, over my career, that if that has ever happened to me, where I had one person who was doing that, you know what I've done? I've let that person go, because I it's better to do that rather than create a risk of somebody who has now become a bottleneck and is holding up everybody else's progress. So so I would say it's about to me, it's as you all grow in your careers, right? You will it's not always that you will be put in a position where you have to be strategic thinkers, right? But I think in every level that you are in, I would recommend that you always try to broaden your horizon, right? Try to understand, the role that you play or the job that you have right now. How does that relate to the bigger picture, right? And do you see that? Do you understand that? And that's one of the things I do at all levels, with my staff is, hey, when you go into work every day morning and when you come out at the end of the day, are you able to, at the end of the day, say that work that you did today, how that meets the mission of the Army, right? Can you explain that? Because if you cannot explain that, then that's where you get, people become demoralized, and if they cannot see how their work is actually helping the mission. So I would ask each of you and others to say, okay, what role do I play? Even though you may be one person in 100,000 person organization, doesn't matter how big it is, you got to be able to make that connection to your way up. And that will start building you kind of this, giving you a feel for the strategic context, which is so important. And then, like I said, it's how do you work in teams where it's not your ego that is driving, who gets credit, right? It's about how the team gets credit. And that is an important context, right? Now, you'll always have people that will say, hey, I'm going to take credit for this kind of thing. And it's okay, because I can tell you, the people that you feel like they are doing that to you in a team will never succeed in the long run. They may have succeeded in the short term, but in the long run, they will never succeed. So the humility and the ability to talk about us rather than me, right? And you guys should all watch this. If you're in any conversation in a team and someone says me or I and not us and we, right, then you're on the wrong team. And so so again, these are things that you don't see when you're young and your early days of your career. But in my case, over the 30 years, what I found is that there are traits in people that that you can tell early on whether they're going to be successful, and are they willing to make the change that they need to make to be successful.
Definitely, sir. That was a great insight. So you worked both in the public and private sector extensively, sir. So what would you say are the differences you've observed in the two?
Yeah, I'd say so because so in the private sector, let me say it's it is all motivated by things that you do are motivated by metrics, right? I won't say money, right? I would say motivated by metrics. There is a clear understanding when you come into work, in any private sector company, that you're held accountable and responsible to achieve a certain outcome, and that is measurable, right? So you can't say, hey, I went to work today and I got work done. Work done is not an indicator of success, right? It's just work done is just expending energy, right? And so what did you accomplish and how did you measure that? And so to me, in the private sector, and again, I won't generalize it because not all private sector companies are the same. The ones that I have been fortunate to be part of have all been able to measure that in some way. When you work for the government, it is very different in the sense that there are very few metrics that are defined. And again, it's only because most government agencies have not matured to that level yet, and they see themselves as, bureaucratic organizations that have to get work done, right? They're in support of, getting work done. So part of my, the change in culture that I'm trying to bring about is for everybody to be much more focused on being outcomes driven, and to be able to measure their progress, right? Individual progress, team progress, as well as mission progress. And so to me, that is one of the things that's definitely a big change. The second change is, if you are able to measure yourself, right, then how do we incentivize you to do even better? And so in industry, you can have stretch goals, and you can say, hey, you achieved this kind of benchmark or this metric this year. Next year, if you achieve 25% better or more, then I'm willing to incentivize you with compensation or other ways to be able to show that you're able to take that risk, right? You're taking that risk and you're accomplishing it. So I'm gonna incentivize you financially or monetarily. We don't have that in the government, and so a lot of times it is moving the goalpost to the next level is hard, because there's no incentive for anybody to do anything better or more than what they're doing today, right? And that's why it's so important to talk about reframing that discussion for me in terms of mission impact, right? Because at the end of the day, most people that come to work for the government, don't come there. Some of them may come there for job stability, but most of them come there because they have a passion for public service and they want to do something for the nation. So there has to be some other emotional factor that is driving them to accomplish better and more than what they're doing today. And so understanding that tie into the mission of the organization and how the role that they as an individual can play is important, because that is the only incentive that they have, right? That's the only incentive you can offer to them, because so much of it is going to be not monetary in nature.
Sure, sir. Do we have time for another question?
Sure.
Possible. Sure, sir. So, given the rapid pace of growth in your areas of expertise, how do you adapt to new developments and implement them in your work? And like expanding to students as such, do you think the education system is industry relevant, and what additions could they make?
Yeah, I think I answered that in the previous two questions in a little way, but I would say keeping pace with technology is really, really tough. And if you look at, by the way, and again, it used to be 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that there were centers of centers where technology was growing rapidly, like in the Silicon Valley, right? So it was easy to say, okay, I'm going to focus on the Silicon Valley and what's going on there and all the startup companies and what's coming out of that. Now, today, it's a worldwide thing, right? If you look, every country in the world now, this technology has really democratized, youngsters around the world to be able to, pursue their passions and develop new technologies. So it's much harder now to be able to keep track and pace with this changing technology. I think we will all continue to struggle through that. I don't believe there's an easy answer to that. I think like I said, you're building a network, a good virtual network can help in some ways, because you're tracking what others or your peers are doing, and you share information with each other. But still, I feel like that is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's just so much out there that will be much harder to adopt. So in the Army, for example, we rely very heavily on the private sector, commercial industry to help us with that, right? But again, even that is hard, because when I was in the private sector, the problem, didn't really go away. Maybe you have a little more exposure to new technology advancements, but it's still tough to always keep track of everything that's happening. So that's why it's really important to prioritize and pick and choose, what you want to focus on, because you really cannot be doing everything. And I've seen a lot of CIOs fail because, they go chasing after every new shiny object that comes along. And when that happens, you lose focus. And so sometimes you have to make that, that conscious choice about, hey, it's okay that I'm not on the leading edge of technology, right? What are my current challenges today, and how do I walk, crawl, walk, run? Because you do not have to be, like I said, in the first adopter every single time. In your second question around, what schools can do better, thinking back at, looking back at my own, 4 years at REC, right? I think, I'm positive and I'm hopeful things have changed, but so much of it again was just individual competition, right? It was all about, hey, how do you compete against somebody else in your class? And I spent, I'd say, almost my entire 100% of my time being a bookworm while I was on campus. And in hindsight, if I could turn back time, I would say, I probably would have learned a lot more if I had, spend more time with, with other students, understanding, dynamics of groups, understanding, how you navigate politics, understanding, how you work with personalities of different types, all the way from bullies to, egotistical people to others, and how do you work in that environment without taking it personally. And I think there's something to be learned from that, in terms of life skills that is easier when you're in college than when you come out from college. And so I would encourage everybody to do that. Not, that doesn't mean you ignore your academic work, which is still very important. But I think hopefully the Indian education system has changed to the point where things are much more collaborative in nature, and like I said, it should be team credit over individual credit, and because that's how things are done in the real world. And you're never put in a position where you solve problems individually. You solve problems as groups, and you win or lose as a group, not as an individual.
Sure, sir. So, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the interview, or can we conclude?
If you don't have any other questions, I think we can conclude. I'm thank you guys for the opportunity, and I'm proud of what I learned in the 4 years at REC, and it's certainly given me a tremendous foundation to where I am today. No doubt, right? Because part of what you go through in those 4 years is building critical thinking and analytical skills. And I always tell people, my own son now is a freshman in college, and I tell him that don't shy away from the toughest classes, because the toughest classes and the toughest professors that you have are the ones that in the short term will be very frustrating, and you'll feel like you're struggling through it, but in the long term, that's what helps build character. And so I'm thankful for the professors and everybody that have given me both challenging times and challenges, as well as other great experiences, because those 4 years as a young adult are truly foundational for the rest of your career. So I welcome the opportunity to continue to mentor and talk to other students, and wish everybody luck in their success, and luck and success in their careers.
Sure, sir. With that, we come to the end of the interview. Thank you for taking the time to answer our questions, sir. We at Feeds are pleased to have conducted the interview in association with NITTSAC. Now I'll hand it over to Venkat to give the word of thanks.
Good evening, sir. Before we move on to the word of thanks, I just have a quick query, sir. I'm currently heading the student alumni cell at NITT, sir. and we look for opportunities to improve alumni interaction with students. We do sessions like these, webinars, panel discussions, etc. Sir. In your perspective, how do you think we can better engage with our alumni, sir?
I think this is a good platform. I just, and again, I believe the internet and social media has now made it so much easier for, you students to have access to people like us, right? And I don't know whether you all maintain some kind of alumni database and how to access people, but I think you should take advantage of that, build a database if needed. I think there are a lot of, alumni, from REC3G that are doing great things. I mean, I'm not an exception here. I mean, I look around and and both all over the world, quite honestly, not just here in the US. I bet you that every one of them has a story to tell that's compelling or even more compelling than mine. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of that and hear from them. Think of these as like TED Talks, right? But ones that would be directly relevant to you students, in your campus, and because the experiences that you're going through are going to be like what we have gone through. So this is a much more of a direct transfer of our knowledge and experiences that we've gone through to you. And so I think this is a one great way to do it.
Yes, sir. Definitely, sir. We work with the aim to bridge the alumni-student relations, and we'll definitely get there and get more alumni, interact with the students, and hopefully connect more students to alumni, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for this opportunity, sir, taking your time out from your hectic schedule. It was a very insightful session, sir. A lot of people aspire to be like you, and we're so proud of what you've achieved, sir. Thanks a lot. I'd also like to thank Dr. Subbayan sir, Dean of Alumni Relations, Dr. Nisha ma'am, Associate Dean Alumni Relations, and Dr. Kalpana ma'am, who gave the welcome address, Alumni Consultant. Thank you, sirs and ma'ams. And I also like to thank the entire team who's pulled it off, both the NITTSAC and FEEDS team, and special thanks to KCP and Pooja as well. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.